this back to the conference, second day, and thank you for taking time off on a Sunday morning. I hope it will be worthwhile for all of us for this important panel discussion. I request everyone to mute their mics as well as their videos, except for the panelists. The panelists, I request them to keep their videos on unless there is a signal from our host that because of technical issues you need to unmute. So you may keep your videos on. Others, I request them to unmute both the mic as well as the video. Okay, so we begin, and I just say a few words in the beginning. And then I'll introduce the panelists one by one. They'll speak, each for about 7-8 minutes or so. And there'll be a little bit of time for the panelists to respond to each other after all the four have spoken. And then we open the floor for discussion by the audience. I hope I haven't missed out the sequence. So we start with a few things that I'd like to say at the beginning. The National Education Policy, NEP 2020, it concerns us quite deeply as a professional teachers organization, I think. It's because I do hope that the association, which is very young, just 2 years old, grows into a sort of a strong pillar which supports change and growth in education in the country in the right directions. I'm very confident that it will. And it's also important because mathematics is important in education as well as beyond education in our lives, and it's becoming more and more important in modern times. And so I hope that as an association, we'll be able to, in the near future, not too far down into the future, influence and shape education policy. Now, this can happen by taking up meaningful initiatives, of course, as an association, which makes a difference to ultimately to the education of our children and youth, and thereby to impacting their lives. But of course, other than taking up initiatives which are practical, which can be implemented, which have some consequences, as an organization, we also have to inform ourselves of education, about education as a broader field that can bring about social transformation. And as members, we must be aware and enrich our perspective on education as a whole. So from that perspective, I see this panel discussion as very important. And I do hope that there will be a slot in every MTA conference for deliberation and reflection on policy matters. Now, reading the policy is not a very simple matter. Policy documents are complex documents. They represent negotiation between different voices, different positions, and one must read not just the surface text, but also what lies underneath. So it's certainly not a simple matter, especially, in a large policy document, you will find nearly everything, every good thing which is being said. And it's difficult to see what really is going to be the impact, what direction the thrust will be, what the priorities are. And so one must read it carefully and deeply. And it must be read in context. I mean, the context, as we are, lots of changes. There is a sharpening of ideological positions in our polity and in our society. So what does it mean when the NEP is read in that context? What does it mean in the context of ongoing initiatives, changes which have happened, major interventions in policy, in legislation, and so on? So how does it, what message and does it convey to us? One can't emphasize this more because, the meanings of the document are important, and one must focus on it because there have been significant changes in the document right up to the final release of the document on the official website. I mean, not only was the draft, which was a very long, detailed document, compressed into a very short one, but there were multiple drafts of this final document which were circulated even on the day the cabinet approved and it was announced in the press. At the press conference, the draft was circulated, and the final one had significant changes even with respect to those copies. I mean, it's important to see that because I think these have been done carefully for certain reasons, and I said in a climate where ideological discourses are carefully being shaped and the differences and so on are being sharpened. So it's important to be aware of this and take that into consideration. I'll also just flag a couple of things. One is that there have been both laudatory statements as well as criticisms in the media with respect to the NEP. I hope we get a sense of that. And beyond that, we also get a sense for what our own stand is. And we are able to take some stand, maybe even see some things that we can do as an association to strengthen education, taking help from this policy or even being alert to some of the directions it might take, which are not very desirable. Two major concerns. So one is, what does it mean in terms of equity in education? As an association, I'm assuming that we are all committed to equitable education, mathematics education of quality for all our children, all students, and all segments of society. So what are the implications for this major national goal, which has been a priority, at least a stated priority from the time of independence? And that was the reason why we attained independence, to realize a certain vision of our country. And what does it mean in that context? Secondly, I think mathematics education somehow figures in important ways in this document. I mean, it seems to be given a lot of space. Of course, so are other subjects. There's an emphasis on multidisciplinary education, especially at the higher education level and so on. But mathematics is highlighted. And I'd like to read a paragraph from the NEP, which sort of conveys this flavor. And it is this para 4.25, where it's talking about the curriculum and the role of mathematics in the curriculum. So it says, it's recognized that mathematics and mathematical thinking will be very important for India's future and India's leadership role in the numerous upcoming fields and professions that will involve artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science, etc. So some specific things are mentioned. Thus, mathematics and computational thinking will be given increased emphasis throughout the school years, starting with the foundational stage, through a variety of innovative methods, including the regular use of puzzles and games that make mathematical thinking more enjoyable and engaging. Activities involving coding will be introduced in the middle stage. Of course, I read this para out, not just because it emphasizes the importance of mathematics in the curriculum and gives it, in some sense, a special place looking towards the future, but also because it contains some specificities and some fairly detailed recommendations, and perhaps that's something that could be the focus of our deliberations today. In any case, I think we will hear our panelists, and we'll have some very interesting reflections. And of course, there will be space for questions, and I invite all of you to ask questions, to raise them to the panelists, and also to express your views. And I'll reserve about 5 minutes at the end of the panel discussion for us to go back and wrap up. And at that point, I'd like the panelists to take a step back and perhaps say something that has struck them today as a result of this deliberation and discussion, or perhaps reiterate something that they feel is very important and for us to take away. So with these words, I'll stop my introduction, and I'll invite the panelists one by one to speak. But let me first introduce them, and our first panelist is Professor Anita Rampal. She, of course, needs no introduction to those in school working in education in general, and even in school mathematics education. She's the former Dean of the Faculty of Education, Delhi University, and professor there. She was played an important role as the chairperson of the NCRT textbook committee at the primary school level. And I know that the mathematics textbooks were particularly close to her heart. And I think she devoted enormous time to shaping the mathematics textbooks, which of course I speak very proudly of as one of our great sort of steps forward in the materials that we have produced. She has been a member of numerous committees in education and teacher education, not just policy forming, but curriculum development and so on, including teacher education curricula. I won't mention all of them. At the international level, she has a certain presence. She is a member of the executive committee of the most prominent organization in mathematics education, namely the International Commission for Mathematics Instruction. She has been a plenary speaker at the Mathematics Education and Society Conference. And so I think she represents something, represent in some sense all of us, the community of mathematics education. So over to you, Anita, and you have about 8 minutes. Maybe I'll give you a warning minute or so just before.
Yes, yes. Thanks a lot, Ravi. Very nice to be together, all of us, a large group, even though we are sort of locked in. And I think that it's important that we've come at a time when the policy has just been approved, in fact, without a debate, actually pushed through during COVID. As we've seen, many other things are getting pushed in. But the matters of concern, in fact, have been there. Fortunately, the very elaborate draft last year itself spelled out many of the details. So even though now they've been summarized, but we know what they mean because they were elaborated in that draft. And if people are interested, I have written even on that draft and have written a couple of articles for The Wire especially. So it is true that at a time, and just 2 days back just yesterday on Teachers' Day, I tried to write because we were, looking back historically, what does a policy mean? And how does it actually shape our commitments, which are beyond just one subject or just one school system? What does it mean for the country? What does it mean for democracy? So it's always very heartening to see that the founding sort of visions for us are larger. The founding visions have... There is some sound which is distracting.
Please mute your mics, everybody. I am Veena Dhingra. Please mute your mic.
So the founding visions which actually brought in the promise for free and compulsory education was that can everyone have a right to vote? And these debates went on for quite some time because they said, normally in other countries also, only those who are educated or who have property will have the rights to vote. And then Gandhi and Ambedkar took very strong positions. Ambedkar more so when he said, we've denied education to the majority. And so now on that basis, we cannot deny vote. And that just living together. So the Constitution is a transformative pedagogical tool. They really look at it as a project which will continuously keep changing and addressing inequities in the country and allow for social justice. And that is what we have to remember whenever we look at a policy. So this policy, in fact, just doesn't look at the notion of inequity. In fact, there is no mention of Dalit or no mention today of what it means to be a Muslim child. So even when it talks of constitutional values, at every point, it pushes that right to the end. So in a list of 30 values, because it's talking about ethical human values, it'll talk about respect for public property or something as mundane as cleanliness and not littering. And at the fag end comes justice and equity. So that is a matter of concern. And it's not just signaling, but it's very clearly spelt in, because this is what the policy is doing. It's stratifying the system even further, especially when it's restructuring school education in terms of 5 plus 3 plus 4. And we'll go into what this foundational stage really means, and even for mathematics. But the overall sort of perspective that it presents to us is that it's going to come up with a very stratified system in which it's declared that 50% children at school and college should be in vocational courses and online courses. It has actually, even though there was hope, because last year the draft said that the RT can be extended to age 3, from age 3 to 18, there is nothing like that. In fact, it just constantly is contradicting the RT. It's contradicting the constitution in many places in terms of its federal structure, in terms of the role of states to be making policy, in terms of role of the state to be making curricula. That is what our constitution, mandates, because education is a concurrent subject. So it has clearly stated that curricula will be made by a national body. It will help state bodies, but the national core essential component will come from there, and states will provide the local flavors or the desired nuances. Even the words are a bit condescending when we look at it, the way it's been framed. So I'm just saying that this is the setup within which it's working. And the structuring of, plus it says that there will be multiple models of education, multiple pathways, alternative models, again, and choices. These, again, in a system as disparate as ours, as already hierarchical as ours, what does it mean? It's allowing for online schooling, course A, B, C, which is grade 3, grade 5, grade 8. So with the RTE, which is a fundamental right already in place, how can a policy override that fundamental right? Because the RTE says that you cannot have these multiple models. Every child should have a good quality neighborhood school, and the RT Act says that it's not just admission, but it's attendance and completion, and any barrier to completion will be checked, will be hauled up. Any cause or any person who's really creating any barrier in a child's completion, and on no grounds, it is a fundamental right that on no grounds can a child be discriminated upon. But what we find in our school system is the child is being discriminated today on this so-called notion of ability. Tests are being given to children, mathematics division. That's what is given. 2 questions in division at grade 3. This is happening in Delhi schools, and I'm very happy that Jyothi is with us because she, for many years, has worked in the same schools, so she can tell us how this happens. But 2 questions in division, and my doctoral students have documented this, and then you are told you are no good. You're actually told that, the name label given to your section is you're a neo reader, your Nishtha, your Vishwas, fancy sounding names, which are not Pratibha. So this whole thing about segregating Pratibha right from primary school, and then even pushing them, because the curriculum is different. We have documented the circulars which say you don't need to teach this to a Nishtha section, and the examination is different. And I have been really asking our maths community, really urging our maths community, even before the policy came, to take positions on this, to question this, to legally ask how can a mathematics examination for a class 6 child be given differently, a dumbed down version to one child, another version to another child, and isn't this discrimination? So I would really like MTA to look seriously on what has been happening even early, and now it is going to be mandated and legitimized by a policy. So all this in terms of making it, making choice possible. So we don't want children to be pushed in. Plus, calling gurukuls, madrasas, homeschools, and silence. And that silence is for low fee private schools, a system which is really taking root, which is $1 billion industry, as the international discourse tells us, where you can have substandard, you don't need to affiliate to any board. And today that's happening. They affiliate only to the open school, so that they make invisible thousands of children, because they have, and like Ekal Vidyalayas are run by right-wing organizations. And at a recent panel discussion, the chairperson of Open School told me, because that discussion was on quality, school quality, and he told me that this is the best model before us, because they don't even ask for a school. They can take classes under a tree. And this is the Ekal Vidyalaya, which is the largest group which affiliates to Open School right now. And the last number I knew was about 60, 70,000, but must be more because that was a couple of years back. So this is what the policy is telling us. You circumvent the right to education. You circumvent basic norms for quality. What is the pupil teacher ratio? What kind of a school, what kind of a professional development should a teacher have before the teacher starts teaching a child? And then you call all that as inputs. And this policy brazenly says all kinds of players can come in, but inputs will not be now looked at. It will only be learning outcomes. So this whole debate of learning outcomes is a debate of denial. It's denying children those basic rights that they have. It's denying disadvantaged children, clubbing them all under one group, and then pushing them under open school like Delhi is doing. Delhi pushes them after class 8 into open school because their results then don't sully the board results. So this, I think we need to look at. And also PPP, this whole notion of public philanthropic partnership, shying away from the word private, but very clearly bringing in private, which is coming into our system. Our government schools have private players coming in. I mean, during COVID, our best mathematics teachers, our senior teachers teaching in high school were telling me and sending me links that they were not allowed to teach all these months. They were only allowed to take the Khan Academy link. So they were showing me those links. And when I went through those, I said, my God, I mean, if a teacher was to be teaching like this, I would say it's really bad because it just nonstop, it's talking, it's telling you every step. It's not giving you a chance to think. Even a step which is visible on the board, it's telling you about it, So this is what our best maths teachers are being forced to do. And this will continue after COVID. So is MTA going to take this seriously? And also I request MTA to take two more things. One, the whole idea of numeracy. What is foundational numeracy? The 5 years which it has clubbed, 3 years of Anganwadi.
Uh, in about a minute, I think.
Okay, yes, sure. I'll rush through. 3 years of Anganwadi with an Anganwadi teacher teaching children, and clubbed with 2 years of primary school doing foundational numeracy until the age of 8. Whereas we think that children can do much more, which, like Ravi reminds us, we in our NCERT textbooks, we have looked at mathematics in a social justice perspective, in a much larger perspective, integrating it with life and other subjects. So that we should be trying to devise what is basic numeracy from our understanding. And also class 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 has been clubbed together for vocational courses. There again, I mean, we know students don't have choice. We know students who want to take science disciplines don't get it in their schools because depending on the marks that they have. So this again is something, what is it we think that should be done? Secondly, subject teachers will be recruited only at a school complex, and they'll be shared by schools around the school complex. What is that going to mean to a subject like mathematics, which is today is in any way a killer subject? Most schools are short of teachers, and students seem to fail in this subject. So what does this consolidation mean? Schools are being merged. Rajasthan had 22,000 schools closed in the last couple of years, already being pushed by Niti Aayog, and Niti Aayog is pushing for artificial intelligence. One last point that, this whole thing about which Ravi read out, that point 4.25, it also comes from the OECD discourse, and I've written about this, that OECD is now pushing computational thinking under mathematics. And they have done, I have seen the surveys they have done in developed OECD countries where they try and say that the jobs now are only now in areas of artificial intelligence. But our carpenters will not be designing their tasks using only artificial intelligence. And I think this is now pushing on something much early in children. I mean, doing coding in grade 3, what is the significance of that without even understanding many other basic aspects of arithmetic and mathematics? So I think questioning artificial intelligence for assessments, they are saying that this will be done. We know the biases built into algorithms, that's been studied, and now using only that. And they say that now it will be done even in primary school. All assessments, not by teachers, but through artificial intelligence algorithms, which are customized, which are biased, and we need to really take up the challenge to resist that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita. I think those are lots of words for reflection, food for thought. Now I go to our second panelist. Uh, that's Dr. Jyothi Sethi. Very happy to have you on the panel, Jyothi. She has a PhD on mathematics. The topic is mathematics for social justice. It's very interesting. She has over 12 years, perhaps more, maybe I've counted wrong, as experience as a teacher. First as a teacher at the primary level, then she has been a primary school in charge, and now she's a secondary school teacher at EGT in mathematics, all in the government system. She has a lot of experience in that area. She's been a key member of an initiative of NCERT called the Group Arithmetic, which produced resources for teachers and students. She has been a co-author of the primary maths textbooks, which came out after the NCF 2005. So lots of experience both in teaching and preparing resource materials. Very happy to have you here, Jyothi. Over to you. So you can take about 7 minutes or so, and I'll give you a warning at the end. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I've been teaching from past 15 years, and if I have to tell you my aim, so it has been always to strive to make learning meaningful and critical process for my students. But as simple as it may sound, it is far more difficult in realization, especially for teachers like me who've been entrusted by the government to teach the children who are coming largely from socially and economically disadvantaged backgrounds. So every time there is a policy documents, as teachers, we all look forward to it with the hope that probably this time we shall have the agency to work as as reflective professional teachers and not perform according to the guidelines given to us, maybe through any philanthropist or a corporate organization. So now we have this national policy on education, which has been given to us in the times of pandemic, when schools are physically not functional, when we teachers are also not meeting physically with each other to understand the dynamics of this document. So practically, normally when there is a document, we do have informal charcha or a discussion in the staff rooms about the policy, but we are missing out on this. However, the SCRT has organized a competition for us to look at the document and prepare certain slides to communicate the material of NPE. So at least some of us are trying to get the access of NPE. So I too read it, and I didn't find it to be something new, because it sounded very similar to the aims of Delhi education model in certain aspects. So what I would like to discuss mainly is, it says in the policy reads that foundational literacy and numeracy for all children is an urgent national mission with immediate measures to be taken with the goal to attain it in short term. And they say that we need to achieve it by class 3. That children have the ability to carry out basic addition and subtraction with Indian numerals. So this is page 8 of policy 2.1. So now, firstly, as a teacher, I don't understand what are these Indian numerals. So are we not going to do mathematics with the internationally used Arabic numerals, which we've been doing in all these years, or do they mean to have Hindi and numerals in other languages? Further, they say that arithmetic needs to be achieved before the rest of the policy will become relevant. So as a teacher, I wonder what will be my aim of teaching mathematics in all these years. So will my aim be as minimalist as attaining, helping the child to attain the ability to carry out the basic arithmetic operations in these foundational years, where I assure that the child is able to do addition, subtraction, and division by the standard algorithm, or like what has been given to us through NCF and the NCERT textbooks, is to develop that fondness for the subject and to develop the entire in mathematical environment around the subject, such that the child's mind gets mathematization happens through various skills, through various experiences. So Delhi government was also in this immediate need to attain literacy and numeracy, for which they created assessment tools. So these assessment tools were given to the children at a tender age of 6. On the basis of those tools, they were asked to solve the questions of division and subtraction, subtraction with borrowing, and division through a standard division method. So when when the state gives you, when the focus of the state is on the learning outcomes, so you as a teacher, you often teach the children by what is expected out, so based on the assessment that happens. So as a teacher, being an insider, we too experience that pressure. We drilled the children to ensure that they are able to do the division test which were there in the assessment tools. We even it demanded that the child is able to do it in class 3, but teachers of class 2 prematurely started practicing the division algorithm with the students, such that their students do not fail the assessment tool and do not fall under the category. So they had 3 categories: Neonishtha, Nishtha, and Pratibha. So Neonishtha, the Pratibha students were those who were able to do all the algorithms, and the Nishtha were those who were able to do the subtraction algorithm, and Neonishtha were the ones who were not able to do subtraction or division. So we have treated the children with such drills. We have ensured that children do not go to their villages during the summer break, because we wanted to participate in this mission Bunyad, where they practice the division algorithms, and we made them believe that this is what is more important than connecting to your family or your cultural roots. So by doing so, we have actually created different groups, and we created we were giving them a study material, and we were giving them a different examination from rest of the students. As Professor Rampal just mentioned, that there were hierarchies within the primary school. So the study material which we were giving them was also very different. So I'll just share the kind of material that we gave them.
The share screen is in green at the bottom.
Yes. Okay, so I'm not able to share that right now. I'll share it towards the end. So the questions were basically to solve the subtraction of borrowing and the subtraction of and the division method. Whereas the other students which we were teaching, who were in Pratibha group, were actually doing this through the math magic textbook, which is being proposed curriculum for the students. So there was in the kind of things that we were doing with the children in the regular classroom were very different. We were allowing them to approximate. We were allowing them to first figure out whether the answer would come out to be greater than 100 or lesser than 100. Even while we were doing the counting, we were not using the charts that were given for the Neonishtha students. They were just number charts being given, and we were asked to recite the numbers daily with the students, such that they get the idea of the numbers, and then they repeat the numbers after you. And whereas on the other hand, while we were teaching them through the math magic textbooks, we were actually giving them the opportunity to first count in twos, and then look at those patterns in twos, and then come to the patterns of 4, and then further. So we were never, so it was kind of a regression. And initially it took time for teachers to get in terms with the mathematics textbooks. And now with this kind of a study material, which was showing immediate outcome of children probably saying the counting or probably doing the maths calculation, teachers' belief, which was getting strengthened in the math magic textbook, got loosened. teachers felt that if this is what is being assessed, if this is what is being asked in the examination, then why would I actually do mathematics in a way that has been proposed in Math Magic, and why not do it through such simple number cards, and why would I spend so much of time in it? And also, when the time is a main agenda, when the time limit to show your results is what is being pushed onto you, so it discouraged the teachers to teach through the mathematics textbook once again. And coming to that stage required a lot of reflection and a lot of peer help from other teachers, that got dismantled. So now NPE also stresses on achieving this aim by grade 3. On the contrary, earlier we had a block of 5 years to build a foundational knowledge of maths. So the curriculum was spiral in nature, and even the textbooks are spiral in nature, where you have 5 years to develop number sense, you have 5 years to develop even for children to understand the algorithms and to solve the questions. And you are not just expecting the child to do it all by the class 3. So NPE proposing it and limiting it to class 3 is a great concern for me as a teacher. That how are we going to do it? Because when we have time till class 5, we not just take care of the cognitive needs of the child, but also other socio-emotional needs of the child. And it really helps. The 5-year block really helps the teacher to actually scaffold the child throughout these years. So with the present bifurcation, one doesn't seem to have that time. Also, the policy suggests of having a state exam at the end of class 3, which would mean as a teacher, I won't be doing the assessment of my child. Earlier, at least teacher representatives of within the department were making the test papers, and they were giving the test papers to class 3 children, and the papers were not decided somewhere outside. So by having the state exam, as a teacher, you would feel the pressure once again towards what is being asked, and that is how I'll mold my teaching. Parents would feel the pressure, and even the students at a very young age would feel the pressure of having a state exam. And then I also question, we've been following a no detention policy, and how would that be shaped in the case of a state examination? Also, NP also has this vision to see India as a tech giant in the global world, and therefore it is critically focusing, as mentioned by Professor Rampal, also, that it is asking about helping children, is focusing on computational thinking right from the foundational stage and introducing coding in the middle school. So having coding and using mathematics for computational thinking for this particular sector, for me it's a very narrow aim of mathematics teaching. Why are we not talking about other things that mathematics would be able to help children learn and do something else? If they are not interested or motivated to get into this sector, what other mathematical knowledge are we going to offer them in the middle school? That's one concern. And even now, many girls
Jyothi,
and students,
I can interrupt. Can you kind of summarize in a minute? I think.
yes. So even now, many girls and students actually do not take mathematics because they feel that in a higher education they probably don't need. So this would further discourage. Also, they are talking about having maths at 2 levels, the standard and the higher one. So once again, it projects to me as a teacher that the ideology behind is the ability-based education that one has to offer. So lastly,
talk
as a
about
teacher,
teaching, talk about training, SCRT training.
Yeah, so also they are outsourcing the responsibility. State has the responsibility to strengthen the teacher through the training programs, but now we have applications like mobile applications like Chocolate, where you are even asked, we are even asked to do the trainings of sensitive topics like prevention of child sexual abuse through mobile apps, through certain slides, and then answering the multiple choice questions. So this is not how we as teachers would want to be. We want, yes, teachers need support, but not we would like to look forward to the state and the organizations like SCRTs and higher education institutions, and not to the philanthropic or corporate organizations who offer us such kind of trainings where we are just sitting back and doing nothing, and they are offering us a training which is so meaningless to us, and also disregarding the sensitivity of the topic for which they are giving us. Okay, so thank you. And lastly, I only want to say is that NP as a teacher doesn't give me that. It does talk about the respect that has to be created for the teachers, but nowhere I could see that, okay, this is how it will strengthen the teacher or a professional teacher education program. And by allowing the corporates and the philanthropist activities, we have experienced it in Delhi government. We are having Khan Academy, we are having Jogyan, we are having Chocolate, we are having Soch Foundation, and I can list out many. And everybody giving us their own objectives and agendas and leaving us confused about our own purpose. What is my purpose as a teacher to teach my child? Thank you.
Thank you, Jyothi, for bringing in that very important perspective. Now I invite Professor Tulsi Srinivasan to speak. Let me introduce her briefly. She is an assistant professor of mathematics at the Azim Premji University, Bangalore. She worked previously at Ashoka University in Sonipat near Delhi, and before that was a postdoctoral fellow at Ben Gurion University in Israel. She has a PhD in mathematics from the University of Florida and is interested in topology and in undergraduate education in mathematics. And I look forward to hearing a perspective on higher education. Over to you, Tulsi.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ravi. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I would really like to thank the MPA for giving me the opportunity to speak at this panel. The NEP has been on my mind for a while. And one of the things that Ravi said is that it has everything. So it's quite difficult to read, and my thoughts on it are not completely clear. And I'm happy to have this opportunity to discuss it with this larger community of maths teachers. The section on higher education in the NEP seems to visualize quite an overhaul of the existing system. And there are many points to be discussed, from how higher education is regulated, the role of the states versus the role of the center, research and funding, teacher education, vocational training, various other things. But at least for the next 7 or 8 minutes, I want to focus on just 2 points. The first is the introduction of this 3 or 4 year multidisciplinary undergraduate degree, especially in the context of maths. This is something that I was quite excited to see initially in the draft NEP, and I'm sure many teachers here feel similarly towards it. But if we need to redesign our programs and our courses, or rethink assessment and classroom practices in this context, the first thing we need to ask ourselves is, what is the purpose of our undergraduate program? Who is it meant for? What expectations should students have from it? And therefore, the second point I want to focus on is this seeming push towards privatization and fee hikes that is implied right through the NEP, and its implications for the purpose of higher education and who higher education is meant for. I feel it's impossible to talk about the first point without talking about the second point. But the two together will take up some time. So these are just the only two that I'll be focusing on right now. So I think I did and still do have mostly positive feelings towards the notion of this multidisciplinary undergraduate degree as opposed to early streaming. For multiple reasons, more instrumental ones as well as broader ones. So I think what people generally say about these liberal arts degrees is that it prepares you not only for different careers, but careers that don't quite exist. It, I think, also exposes students to how versatile their subject is, how it appears in other disciplines. From institutions that I worked in, I've seen students of mathematics move on to philosophy, linguistics, neuroscience, various kinds of jobs in the financial sector, education sector, social sector, animation. And I think to some extent, this exposure to other disciplines is helpful. But all of these are really advantages from the viewpoints of individuals. And while they are very good in that sense, I think that if we think about this sort of multidisciplinary undergraduate degree from the viewpoint of groups or communities, there are still advantages that one could get out of it. Coming back to a point that Anita made earlier, I think it's impossible to escape from mathematics and technology. It's everywhere from our work lives to our private lives. And I think it's important that those who learn mathematics and computer science and engineering also study history and sociology and political science and literature. And if you're working in the financial sector or the IT sector or AI, which shows up a lot in the NEP, or data analytics, I think it is good to have some understanding of society, the power of mathematics, the limitations of mathematics, how mathematics can be abused. And at the same time, I would like to see math students then entering, well, I would like to see my mathematics students entering data journalism or law, and places in which it's increasingly important to have a solid foundation of math. But I think the problem that all of us are aware of is that simply offering choice or multidisciplinarity for the sake of choice is not worth very much. And however you design your program and whatever electives you offer, what students get out of it is not so much from the courses you decide to offer, but much more from interactions outside the classroom, their peers, the kinds of conversations they have, what they read and talk about with them, from their sports fields, from reading groups, and so on. And so I don't think, I think it's really then important not to think about how we design curricula, but to think about what is happening on the ground. And I'm talking about this as someone who works in one of these institutions that is talked about a lot by the NEP, or what I don't remember all the phrases that they use, but they talk about philanthropic public partnerships, so a private institution that is public-spirited private institution. And I should say that working at such an institution where although it is private, the aim is to produce or replicate some version of a public space, it is extremely difficult to do even if you want to. And there's not too much reason why institutions would want to. And even if you do, it doesn't just happen. So there are multiple explicit references in the document, as various people have mentioned, about how private institutions will be encouraged, and many implicit and explicit references to the rising cost of education. Now, none of this is anything new. It's things that are happening right now. But I think it's very different if we think as a group, or our government thinks about what it wants out of education, and this is a plan as opposed to something that happens on its own. There is an entire section in the document on equity and inclusion. And of course, there are points that are brought inside the section that are important, but there was one quite telling sentence in that, which is that the policy talks about higher education as being able to lift individuals and communities out of a cycle of disadvantage. And I think that really seems to capture the approach of the policy towards equity and inclusion, which is that higher education, it seems to view higher education as being going further on the road that it seems to be going on these days, that higher education is going to be a space that is exclusive, that is alienating for most students, and institutions as an act of charity will bring in specific individuals for their own betterment, which is a very different view from what a view we could have of higher education, where it is a public good, where students and faculty come in from different backgrounds with different skills and interests and learn from one another. Uh, I think, again, how we offer these multidisciplinary or more open kinds of programs should not, I don't know how it could be done, but if we are, if the policy seems to be pushing for spaces which don't view education as a public good, don't view higher education as something that gives students not just a career, but a sense of their own rights, a sense of empowerment, a sense of belonging, then it could just be a very superficial and instrumental change. So I think I'm unfortunately not a member of the MTA, so it's not for me to speak about what the organization can do. I don't really know that. As I feel as an organization, perhaps much more could be done about this at the policy level. At the level of individuals, there are some things we can do in our classes to compensate for the problems that the policy brings in. Thinking about ways in which we can make maths classes more inclusive, ways in which, especially in the first year, we can bring in more types of active learning, group discussions, places where students are forced to talk to one another, work with one another, collaborate with one another, and so on. Yeah, so this is something I don't want to go on about this for too long, but this is something I think we could talk about in the discussion a little more. And yeah, I think otherwise I would like to end at this point. Thanks.
Thank you, Tulsi. I think those were really useful things, and I think you've seen some things which are in terms of implications flowing out of the NEP for maths teachers. Of course, MTA is a very young organization, so all of us, I think, you're a member in some sense because you're participating in it. So you can think of yourself as one. So now I invite Professor Amber Habib to give his views. Professor Amber Habib is a mathematician who's been very deeply interested in mathematics education at all levels, including school and the college level. He's the Dean of Undergraduate Programs at the Shiv Nadar University and also the head of the Department of Mathematics. He's been a long-standing teacher in the very well-known MTTS program, Mathematical Training and Talent Search program, which has been extremely successful for many decades. He's one of the teachers in that program. He has worked on initiatives on applications of mathematics to real life, focusing on connecting mathematics education to applications and so on. So this, I'm sure you'll have very interesting views. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Ravi. Hello, everyone. So I think the panelists so far have already brought out all the main issues. What I thought I would do is it was actually, as has been pointed out, the NEP is a really difficult document to read in the sense that what it says could mean anything. So it depends entirely on who finally is pushing for certain actions to be taken and how they interpret the things in the NEP. Many people are reacting to it and saying it's not as bad as it could have been and are relieved on that account. That very much depends on how you read it. It also, one has to see what governments have been doing and how NEP fits into that. To me, it seems that all the things that could be good in NEP, if governments were sincere about them, then they would be happening without NEP as well. It would already have started happening. Education would have the funding that it deserves. Why do we have to wait for NEP? And in fact, I think what one has seen lost in the discussions, in the revisions, is the commitment that there would be increased spending. There were much clearer statements on that earlier. Now it's much briefer. And it remains to be seen. And anyway, when you say that you will increase the percentage of GDP under current situation, I don't know what increasing percent of GDP means, as a commitment to education in India. Okay, so but let me start. I'll go way back to about 2001. Okay, maybe it's not really way back, but it's somewhat back. Okay. At that point, for instance, mathematics curricula at the university level were governed by what was called the UGC model curriculum. It came into being in 2001. And this is what it set forth. This is generally what it talked about as what should be happening in higher education, multidisciplinary skills, linking general studies with professional courses, and so on. Okay, and then this is what it said specifically about mathematics, that students need thorough knowledge of the fundamental principles, results, the enormous power, know how to use them in all phases, modeling, solving, and interpreting. If one even takes this and compares with things in NEP, so some things are repeated from here. But for instance, like Ravi read that paragraph about mathematics and mathematical thinking, and that is a much narrower and much more sort of mathematics as an instrument for a particular vocation kind of approach to mathematics compared to what we had even in the UGC model curriculum of 2001. This was in fact quite interesting. At the time, I was just starting out as a college teacher. I had not read this document. I read it much later. Uh, but it had committee members from various universities and institutions, so it was quite it had quite broad representation, and it is a much richer document than what has happened in the 20 years after that. Okay, for instance, in 2015, then one sees the UGC's choice-based credit system. 2015, 2016 roughly is when the details were filled in. Okay. And first of all, it started with a rather curt dismissal of whatever had been happening so far. It claimed that the majority of higher education institutions were following a system which obstructs flexibility and mobility. First of, it's also curious that this is sort of the big statement that it had to make about what had been happening so far in higher education, that it was difficult for students to move between different institutions. Okay. What did it set forth as its main objectives? The CBCS of 2015. Okay. That there should be something, a shift from what it considered teacher-centric to student-centric education. I could not make any sense of this sentence. In what way was previous education's teacher-centric, and how CBCS was really going to make it student-centric. But otherwise, it's sort of procedural things, that you can take credits, you can take as many as you like, which really hasn't happened. It's the what CBCS you actually have in practice is a very fixed system. You have some electives that you choose, but you really cannot go around choosing beyond the fairly narrow prescribed electives that you have. So lots of things were written there. And again, I think if you read this, you will find similar things written into today's NEP. So one thing is that whatever is being claimed about NEP, in many ways, it is a straight continuation of trends that we already had in terms of what governments were proposing. Okay. I think everything that is here, you will essentially find in NEP with maybe slight rewordings. So what else did CBCS want? It said that it wanted to ensure quality. It said it wanted to ensure student mobility across majors and across institutions. There were also perhaps unstated reasons. These, when I say these were unstated in the written document. Otherwise, they were not unstated. They were openly stated by the HRD minister of the time in various places. And that this reason was the belief that the government does not have the resources to actually provide higher education to to the entire Indian population as such, does not have the resources to increase the gross enrollment ratio, cannot start new institutions. And so the way out was that you would promote online teaching. and that you would try to reach out to students by online teaching. And for this to happen, you needed uniformity and you needed centralization. So there was a strong emphasis that syllabi must become uniform across institutions. Right? And so here are ways in which the NEP develops and promotes all these further. Okay. For instance, this is, so I think section 10 is when it starts talking about higher education. Right. So right away you have the emphasis on open learning, on distance learning, online programs, that now all institutions will have this option. And I think when they say will have this option, they mean that everyone will have to do it. Right. So everyone will have to do this, that you promote online learning and that, yes, supposedly it will enhance your offerings, it will improve access and so forth. Okay. So I mean, maybe it will improve access for many people, but it will certainly not improve access for everyone, and it will miss a lot of people for sure. I think we have already seen that in COVID times, that when we have tried to reach out to our students by online means, depending on circumstances, depending on the universities and the particular students that we serve, some of us may have succeeded in reaching most of them, but others definitely would not have. And for no fault of their own, it's just not possible given the situation of the country. Right. So again, it repeats that this provides a natural path to increase access to quality higher education. It says even teacher training can move online. It can be carried out through Swayam and Diksha. There is an emphasis on multiple entry and exit points, right? So when they propose 3 and 4 year undergraduate programs, at the same time they say that a student may leave after 1 year or 2 years as well. Okay. So this continues the business of making it easier for students to move between institutions. It says there'll be a bank of credit which will store academic credit centrally, and so that you can use these to when you move between institutions. Okay. UGC is being replaced by this higher education council, and then they use this language that within it there'll be 4 verticals for different aspects of looking after higher education. And in particular, one of those so-called verticals is this General Education Council, which will look after the curriculum part. Others will look after governance and so forth, okay, or finances and other things. So, but the GEC will look at your curricula. And what it will do is it will frame expected learning outcomes for higher education programs. It will set up norms for credit transfer equivalence. Somehow in the last 5-6 years, credit transfer between institutions is becoming the major goal of higher education. It's very strange because as such, hardly any transfer happens in India, and there is hardly any demand or capability within institutions to support this. You can set up a credit transfer system, but do institutions have space to suddenly admit somebody in the second year or the third year of their program? We do not. Right? So this is some sort of pipe dream. As far as existing Indian institutions go, perhaps if we are bringing in international institutions, it may be helpful for students who want to switch to them or who go there and don't like it and want to switch back. It may facilitate that. I really cannot understand what is the big deal about this within the existing Indian system. But somehow, this is what is getting emphasized over and over again. This business about learning outcomes is also interesting. I mean, this is now a standard thing all over the world that your courses, individual courses, as well as your entire degree program should have clearly stated learning outcomes. But generally, this is part of a bigger framework, right? You start with the higher aims, the broader aims, and then you come down to the learning outcomes. And the learning outcomes are supposed to be things that you can test for. So this is when you want to see whether any of your broader aims are actually being met, and you cannot really test them. They are often intangible. You come up with some version, something related to them that you can test for, and you call that a learning outcome. So now, if the GEC is going to switch, now so the UGC used to create curricula, and those curricula had become very problematic for universities because the same curriculum was being imposed on everyone regardless of circumstances, regardless of who they served. now it seems rather than curricula, we will have enforced learning outcomes. Now, in some way, it could be the same because if you put down sufficiently detailed learning outcomes, you will basically dictate the curricula. You will basically dictate the syllabi. But because learning outcomes by definition are related to tests, it could also be, I think, this was noted by an earlier panelist, this could also be a way that your teaching ends up becoming exam oriented. Very specifically written learning outcomes will basically dictate what your exams should be like, what they should contain. And then one could very well increase the culture of teaching to the tests. And so this is a serious problem with NEP because at some places it says that you should not over test and tests have various problems, you should move away from them. Yet at the same time, whereas those things are left vague, things which are specific actually go against that, right? And so, for instance, these learning outcomes. Okay.
Amber, could you summarize in
Yeah.
about yourself? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. This is just for fun. The NEP likes the word multidisciplinarily a lot. And again, people have, I think, opened NEP and, even I, maybe the first time I opened it and I found it early, I said, sure, that's nice. I like multidisciplinary. My university promotes multidisciplinary. But then I found it over and over again until it loses meaning completely. Okay. It occurs 69 times in 62 pages. Every page has multidisciplinary attached to something or the other. Every time it uses a word, a new term or a term, every time it wants to emphasize something, it puts the qualifier multidisciplinary in front, right? What does this mean? Mathematics does find mention, it occurs 18 times, but generally, as one amongst many subjects, the paragraph that we had read is, I think, the only place where it really occurs by itself. So, which makes one worry. I would have preferred it if it had not occurred at all separately. Mathematics and Sanskrit, I think, are the only two which occur on their own. And this extra attention actually makes me a little worried. Okay, let me just finish with things with this what do we do issue, right? Uh, I think as people have been saying, no, we have to create a public dialogue on education, the education policy and maths education. NAP has not defined its terms. It has left its goal vague and they could lead to anything. And I think we have to somehow try and influence the interpretation and execution. Uh, I don't think it's practical to think that we can have the NAP replaced in the next few years by anything else. Things will be based on this. Maybe we can try and build up a consensus on what things should mean and and hope to moderate the effects on NEP in that way, right? For example, what does multidisciplinary mean? How much should it be emphasized? Okay. Online and distance learning, is it to some extent, okay, is it a necessary evil that we have to live with? Fine, but can it become a full-fledged equivalent substitute for regular education as NEP seems to be promoting and as general policy has been promoting for some years? Is mathematics education to shift towards the needs of data science and machine learning? And how much can an undergraduate education provide, even if you give 4 years? Okay. NEP seems to want expertise in one, preferably two disciplines to basically research level. You should be able to start PhD essentially after your BSc of 4 years, which would be called a BSc with research. It's also supposed to contain broad education towards being a fully contributing citizen. It is also now supposed to contain integrated training for vocations as well, at least one vocation, I think, according to NEP. How do you squeeze all this into a single undergraduate program? Okay. I think those of us, I mean, for instance, my university, we do have a 4-year program. It is what we try to aim for is expertise in one discipline and broad education towards being a fully contributing citizen. And it's, in my opinion, completely packed already. Okay, you can't put in more things without taking something out. There is a cost for everything. And NEP and recent policy documents in general in education do not pay any attention to that. You are just said, we'll also do this, we'll also do this, we'll also do this, and you cannot. And what the choices are not explicated, not worried about. Maybe there were some discussions, but none of that has made it to the policy papers. Okay, and one last thing, this implication of multiple entry and exit points and of standardization. See, if you want to exist usefully from an undergraduate education in 1 or 2 years, then that first 1 or 2 years must be planned so that you leave with some significant achievement already in those 1 or 2 years. But that is not how our programs are set up now. They are set up to give you the background so that you can do truly significant things and many significant things in your third year or maybe in your fourth year if it's a 4-year program. So a program that if you're going to leave a program after a year and have it be useful in your life, it must be an entirely different, a specialized program, not just the first year of a regular 3 or 4 year program, right? So this kind of flexibility that they're talking about, again, I find it quite meaningless. You can think, okay, there is someone they don't want 3 years education, they want 1 year education. You can think about that, but then you have to come up with something completely dedicated to them and not just the first year of a 3 year program. So anyway, these are some of the things I think NEP has brought up. These are continuations of issues from the past. I think if we can speak more in public and somehow increase the number of people talking about it and thinking about it, that is perhaps what we can hope to do. When better times come, we may actually be able to do something real about. Okay, I'll stop there. Okay, all right. Thanks again for this opportunity to present these opinions. Okay.
Thank you, Amber. Maybe you can stop the screen sharing now. Thanks. Great. It was nice to hear those views from all the panelists. And so we don't have a lot of time left. We just have 15 minutes to 1 p.m. So what I propose to do now is to sort of take questions from the audience, or rather I'll begin by taking questions which have appeared in the chat box, which I'll read out myself. But I do want to reserve sort of last 5 minutes to the speakers to kind of wrap up or respond in whatever way they wish to. So we may go over time by about 5 or 10 minutes, and I hope that that's okay. We'll try not to do it go beyond 1:10 p.m. So that's the plan. But if, of course, if you wants to say something strongly, please do so. So let me begin by taking a few questions which have appeared in the chat box. I must say that there are lots of comments in the chat box, which I would urge people to read. I hope the chat box will be accessible somewhere. And many of the comments, of course, are agreeing with the speakers, what they're saying. But I'd like to open with this question, which kind of thought that suggested to me that I should say something. Would the recordings of these sessions be open? And people can correct me, but I think, yes, the idea is to have these sessions available for those who could not attend the conference, and they will be available on YouTube. And of course, permission will be taken from all the people who spoke, etc. But I would say that, please feel free to express your views. Whether if there's strong convictions which are different from those which are expressed or which agree with them, please feel free. This is your forum. If you have mild disagreements, you're tentative about something, again, do feel free. You can say, don't you think, and so on, and do express yourself. We welcome debate, discussion. That's how I think we move forward in our own understanding. We are open, inquiring, critical people. And so this gives us an opportunity to revise our own views. So, okay. So let me take, there are lots of comments, especially on, I think, concerns about what's been implemented at the ground level in, the example was of Delhi schools streaming in very early age into different groups and so on. So do read them. I think they are important comments and they're important issues. But let me begin with this question from Ashoka Chowdhury, which says that unfortunately, mathematization, critical thinking have not been addressed in NEP 2020. Maybe it is focusing on learning outcomes. Of course, the NEP is not only about mathematization, not only about mathematics. So we may not find a long elaboration on that. And I think on learning outcomes focus, I think there's been enough said. So let me perhaps take 1 or 2 more questions, which gives the speakers opportunity to respond. So there's a question by Sajna, which says that is there any provision for school teachers to work in tandem with NCRT or SCRT in projects with curriculum development objectives? Okay, so that's another second question. Let me take one more and then open it out to the panelists to comment. So there's a question which says, which asks, do you feel that NEP has tried to look into the needs of the current education system, which is so old-fashioned, and it has laid out the grounds for a future in education? I think it's suggesting that maybe the NEP is future-oriented in a strong way, and is that something positive, or do we have something critical to think about? Okay, so those three questions, let's take them first, and perhaps would anybody like to respond to them? Any of the panelists, or to other things which you have noticed in the chat, so we can keep it free. So, Amber, since I see you on the screen, would you like to start off by responding to any of them?
Yes, sorry, I was reading the questions at the same time. So,
Nice.
for instance, I like one question, if I may respond to that one.
Please do.
It was that isn't the online education system in contradiction to the revival of the traditions of Takshila, Nalanda, and so on? I suppose so. And of course, what they were themselves, I think, we have some some vision of what they were is being propagated. It's hard to say to what extent it's correct in any case. But yes, whatever is known is that it was very personal instruction, and online education certainly is not in that tradition. So, so yeah, so this is perhaps again, that there is no concern for consistency in this document. You are writing a paragraph on some topic and you put in whatever you think will make it sound better, and you are not really concerned with whether it's consistent with something else or what is the broader goal of the document. That is a serious problem with it. Uh, Again, that is what makes it hard to, it's difficult to talk coherently about a document that's not coherent itself, right? If it makes a certain, if it just says everything.
Okay, let me put another question since Amber is there and Tulsi, because I think it relates a little more to higher education. The couple of questions related to that. One is from Riddhi Shah saying that don't we have, you need a solid basic training in maths to do high level research. So research early is not a good idea. People should have a more solid background in the discipline. And that's also echoed by Jeenath, who refers back to the talk yesterday by Professor Neena Gupta, and saying that, won't the multidisciplinary approach at undergraduate level sort of dilute the disciplinary engagement and the growth? So is there a concern about that? So maybe that's something that, particularly maybe others, but Amber and Tulsi, would you like to say something?
Tulsi, you can go
Okay,
first.
sure. Okay, my sense right now is no, I don't think so. I feel like this, okay, there are many problems that we have all raised about the NEP, but this doesn't strike me as an issue. For maths, I think if you have maybe 13 or 14 core courses which appear in many different kinds of problems, I think one is equipped to start both getting a sense of what research in maths could be like, and to enter a solid graduate program. So what would one need? One would need some linear algebra, one would need some analysis, maybe some discrete maths, maybe some calculus, maybe a course on proof techniques. I don't know. I think there's really a limited amount of knowledge, technique one needs. There's a little more mathematical maturity one needs. So maybe over the 4 years, one would slowly acquire that as well. But I think we can look to many programs in which undergraduate research is something that is possible after a few years, and then a student could grow naturally into a graduate research program. to me, the problem is not that so much as working with the baggage that students come in, that they come in with quite often low levels of confidence because of the kinds of education they have been exposed to, or the environment that they come into. So just to give some examples that I've encountered, students who come in and suddenly find some people who are speaking in English very, very fast, or who come in into a classroom that is dominated by men when they are women. That sort of thing, I think, takes more time to get over, so that you get used to the notion of being able to do mathematics and being able to become a mathematician or feel at ease with the subject, much more than the disciplinary knowledge one needs to get. Sorry, that was a little all over the place, but to roughly answer the question, I think that part should be okay. Amber, if you want to
Ravi,
add.
can I just come in here
Sure.
briefly on two things? One, Delhi University has had a failed experiment with the four-year course. We know, I mean, with the best minds available in Delhi University, we know the reservations and the opposition that our academics had to the way it was designed, and that they were in fact marginalized, and a very mediocre, dumbed down course came in. The first year was almost like a waste for most people. They felt, just trying to say foundational communication skills, etc., you're actually wasting our time. Students find it so difficult to pay even for a 3-year course when they're staying in PG accommodation in hostels. They come from all over the country, and the rationale to add another course made no sense. No one actually said that what is the rationale for this course. So I think that we have enough experience, even looking at the way the mediocre courses were developed. And multidisciplinarity is again a buzzword which is outdated. If we have to do something creative, it's interdisciplinarity. How do you look at it where people from different disciplines sit together and start restructuring and reconceptualizing, re-envisioning what would be their disciplines? And we know, for instance, that even Finland, which comes up as one of the leading countries in terms of quality and equity and performance, is now saying that higher courses should really move, the curricula should move away from disciplines. It should really be interdisciplinary courses, and they're working on that. So I think we are getting away from the more creative challenges. We are using buzzwords, which we've seen actually mean nothing the way they are designed, and they bring in more mediocrity. And you just keep students more in the four-year course. And in fact, you legitimize exit out of the first year, which I think Amber has already spoken, plus raising the GER. In the last 10 years, there's been tremendous demand for higher education, and the numbers have gone up, but they are all in ODL, and they are really weighted towards the disadvantaged groups. You can see that people have studied what is the SC/ST, what is the OBC, what is the component of students which is just getting marginalized only to the ODL. And ODL is now the buzzword for any selections that I've gone to, even for universities, central universities. The teachers who come only show you as their credentials the ODL programs that they've helped develop. And these are mediocre programs. They're worse than a lecture oriented course, So I think that we have to resist this whole push towards ODL and push towards some totally without a well-conceived, without a logic, a rationale, making a four-year course, which is just going to be pushing people out after a year and saying, now you get a diploma, after 2 years you get a certificate, or the other way around. So I think that this only seems rhetorical, but in practice we have seen where it has led to.
Yeah.
One more thing. The whole system is using Bloom's taxonomy to decide learning outcomes. I must tell you that in education, we threw out Bloom's taxonomy almost 30 years back. And now I find higher education trying to grapple with a completely behavioristic Bloom's taxonomy.
Okay, yeah. I think lots of concerns, and I suppose whenever there's buzzwords thrown around like multidisciplinary, etc., there's scope for professionals like MTA members, etc., to shape it in some way. Do you want to add anything, Amber? Shall we go to the next set of questions?
I actually wanted to add one point, if Amber
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. No, I think more about this notion, which both Amber and Anita talked about, of the word multidiscipline losing its meaning. There's one particular example from the NEP itself, which stood out for me in the section on professional education. So this notion of a pluralistic approach comes in the section on agricultural education, talking about how one needs to integrate traditional practice with modern techniques and also emphasize on problems like climate change and sustainable agriculture. In the very next section, which is on healthcare, I think the sentence is that because of a pluralistic approach towards healthcare, medical students will all need to learn about Ayush. So the same word means anything that you want and can be used to justify anything that one wants.
Yes.
Yeah, that was it. Sorry, Amber,
And
please.
it's amazing the way science academies have come out against this. Our science academies normally don't speak on public issues. They've actually written a very detailed response to the draft, saying how it's going to really regress back in the way science academies or science research or expertise had been built up. If you expect all these institutions now to be running liberal arts and multiple disciplinary courses.
Sorry, I just muted myself. So let me take another couple of questions. And there's one general concern which expressed by Geeta, which I'm sure is there in the minds of many. Which let me air that. I mean, this is a policy document, and we know that there's a huge gap between policy documents and actual implementation on the ground, which raises a host of issues. I mean, does the policy document actually have any impact at all? I mean, does it really shape the future, or it's something that just remains on paper, while something else goes on the ground, or it's not implemented because there's not enough resources, money, will, whatever you like. And so if there's something that, strikes you on this issue or this concern, please do share. But let me add another question before you respond to that, which is that just to bring in another topic, which is a question asked by Jan, that Ramanujan, that NEP has a great deal of discussion on teacher education and B.Ed. And this is sort of flagged both in the school education section as well as in the higher education section. So it's open for all of you to comment on. So let's take those two concerns.
If you allow me to. Okay. I want to say that, having read and taught and shaped policy myself, that what this policy, I mean, policies do in the past, 86 policy had led to many things, leads to schemes, leads to government programs. This policy is legitimizing many things that have happened in the last 5 years. We can see how, whether it's school closures or mergers or many of these other things about teacher tenures, now it's trying to legitimize. In fact, when the draft came out, the only thing that struck me at that point, when journalists also asked me, was that it was pushing for a Rashtriya Shiksha Ayog, complete centralization under the PMO. So that, because of the opposition, has been brought in, brought out, brought in, now brought out, but because even Gujarat opposed it. So the centralization has been happening. This one will legitimize many things that have been happening. This will legitimize many things that Niti Aayog has been doing. And so that is where I see it. And that's why it is more worrying. And the second question, which Jam had asked, yeah, I want to say that in B.Ed, it says a lot of things that some of us have been working towards, asking for a 4-year course, and things like that. And we know that our experience in the 4-year course, despite all of us having engaged in designing it, is not a very happy one because the way it's implemented. But about teachers, I'm most worried. One, in terms of their recruitments, what it's telling us, and the draft gives us details about it. The second one, in terms of the merit appraisal system, it's put in which it's going to have multiple salaries on one scale, and it's going to have appraisals through the community, through peers, through students, and through many other components. Worrying in the present context, how is a teacher being appraised by the community? We already know our teachers being sent to prison. And thirdly, in terms of tenure track, It's extended probation. For school teachers, 3 years, for college teachers, 5 years. And so many of the things, if we read that carefully, the draft, the teacher's professional development is made modular, completely modular, online courses only. And you can choose 50 hours the way you want to do it. So again, as Jyothi had pointed out, today SCRT is not doing face-to-face trainings. Delhi University in its refresher courses has only people from right-wing organizations coming and talking about right-wing philosophy, even for specialized courses. So we know what is happening under the name of teacher training, and then saying it's going to be modular, you can pick up modules from wherever you like, is very, very worrying.
Okay. I don't know if Jyothi wants to intervene now or perhaps at the end of this round, but I'm sure she'll have something to say on the teacher education front. Do you want to speak now, Jyothi, or shall we come back later?
Yeah. So as far as teacher education goes, this is actually, as Professor Rampal pointed out, very worrisome. As a teacher, you want to get into a professional development program and you look forward to SCRT as your state council mentoring you. But now you have been, SCRT has outsourced it. It has outsourced it to the organization, to the private players. And they are also doing it through an online mode. Probably primary teachers specifically are in any case intellectually isolated, and by doing so, by making it by putting such things on phone, you're not even allowing them to meet personally and learning from their peers as well. So also that SCRT in itself is not recruiting teacher educators. They've been they are deputing from here and there, and the whole idea of outsourcing the teacher education program to others is very worrisome for me. Why state is not investing on strengthening the teacher education program, both pre-service and in-service program at SCRT, and teacher training programs being done through SCRT, the way it was happening earlier. Although I would not like to comment on the quality of those trainings, but at the same time, it allowed us as teachers to get onto a place and at least raise our voices, raise our concerns, learn from our peers. So that is something which is being missing through the present government regime. And by NPE, one see that this is going to be the future as well. So yes, this is one of the main concerns. And also regarding the appraisals, even now our appraisals are very biased. So it is not that and now getting into various players into it, that you get the feedback from the community, from the parent, from students and everywhere. So I really don't know how this is going to work. And they are saying that they are going to dismantle the hierarchy of teachers in the school. But what I see is that when they say that every teacher on the basis of the merit will get the salary, so this is a very subjective thing. What would be those merits? And what would be the good performance of a teacher? So then this is also a major concern in terms of if I see it as a teacher, that this is a concern. How will my performance be judged? And yeah, so these are the 2 points that I wanted to stress on. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Jyothi. So we are kind of running out of time now. So I'll make a suggestion. I think some people have raised their hands. So please type. I don't think we have time to take those questions orally, but do type it into the chat box. And I request Arul and others to pick it up and point it out to me if they feel that's something that's important to be addressed. So I think we have little time to address questions, but nevertheless, let me read out a few because I think they reflect some of the concerns of the teachers in this group, which are specific. So perhaps you may not reply to them, but it could be replied to offline or later on. One question is, does the NEP mention anything about how to help students choose a particular course? I mean, this seems to be a specific concern. There's another concern expressed, how coding will be taught to teachers who are interested in, I suppose, learning coding. There's a view expressed that isn't online teaching more in tune with what is taken up by the youth these days. Why should we go in that direction? So I'm just reading these out, but I don't think there's time really to respond to them. Do engage with the speakers offline after this program, and do talk to them. Let me just ask Arul or Shweta if they want to highlight any question, which Jam has suggested that write a mail with your queries to MTA. Maybe that can be directed to the right people. That's a good suggestion. So Arul or Shweta, do you want to add anything to something on the chat box which I might have missed, or some of the questions
Not
which
really.
came up
No,
on
not
YouTube?
from my side. I think we
Okay.
covered some.
What about you, Arul? Do you have anything to add?
There is this one comment which says the vertical mobility of teachers in diet is a welcome step, and then one regarding the regional. I mean, mathematics education in regional language could help students, especially from the rural areas. I mean, this question is phrased as if is there any advantage in using regional languages to teach maths in rural areas?
Okay, those are, I think, useful and interesting comments. Maybe it points to some things which are positive in the document, which could be amplified through efforts of MTA, such as resources in regional languages, or the other comment you mentioned about mobility of teachers and professional opportunities. I hope those things become a reality and not remain just on paper. So now it's 1 minute to 1:10. So I'm not going to ask all the speakers to speak, but if anybody has any last words, do share them, and then we'll close the session. Any last words, Jyothi, Tulsi, Amber, Anita? Okay. Closing thoughts, reflections.
What
Okay.
I heard from Jyoti about what's happening in schools and Delhi schools, I think that was extremely disturbing. That is something, what we can do about it, we should see. Because it's not just the national policy, whatever things are already happening, we should see what we can do about them.
Yes.
I agree. I think that was also something very concerning, I should say, that I felt so also. And yeah, that's a good point. So I hope MTA can do something about it, and at least highlight the problems and the difficulties. I mean, streaming at such a young age is really a concern. Okay, so I think we had a useful and interesting session. So thank you, everyone. Thank the panelists. I thank the audience. Lots of interesting questions. Let's pursue them, and let's maybe do something about it. So thank you once again, and do join for the next session, which is the technology session. And I think, is it at 3 p.m. or 2:30?
It's at 2 p.m.
2 p.m. 2 p.m. Sorry, yeah. Today we have a packed program. I'm sorry. It's at 2 p.m. Yeah. So do join back, have a quick lunch, and hope to see you again. There are two parallel sessions. One technology workshop for college teachers, and there's a technology workshop for school teachers, all levels of school. So do check the Zoom links as per your email and the code. Otherwise, join on YouTube. The YouTube links are there on the conference language. So see you in a while. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, we'll keep the chat box open for about 10 minutes for people to chat.